Welcome to another BTL exclusive where we're going to talk about the MLB playoffs right here on the Bookit Sports Podcast Network. And before we dive in, please make sure you follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you're tapped in. We're going to keep dropping some of these BTL exclusives through the NFL season and through the MLB playoffs as well. Javon, how we doing? Are you excited to talk some playoff baseball?
Of course, super excited. It's always a great time, especially during the wild card series when you just have absolute madness every day.
Yeah, typically madness in the MLB postseason. Like even non-baseball fans get tapped in and they want to, bet the playoffs and, at least watch it. Postseason baseball hits different. Last year, Javon, we had the D-backs and the Rangers involved. This year, they're nowhere to be found. They didn't even make the playoffs. That's pretty crazy. Typically, you see the teams who at least go to the World Series or championship in the next year make the playoffs. Maybe one team misses it in a letdown spot, but both of those squads not going to be in the playoffs this year. Javon, thoughts on the Rangers and D-backs missing out in the postseason this year? Are you surprised? Are those teams frauds?
Not surprised about the Rangers because we kind of knew how they were built. They're very top heavy, and then they got pretty key contributions from a lot of guys. They got hot second half of the season. I guess really like the last month and a half of the season that carried them into getting into the playoffs in the first place last year. So not too shocked there. They had some injuries this season too. I don't want to bail them out because they're really terrible with all the guys that were healthy, but I definitely am a little surprised about the D-backs. I feel like even though they were dealing with some injuries all season too, the lineup was a little shaky throughout the season. It wasn't really consistent, and the pitching staff, I would say, didn't really take the step that I think everybody thought it would after seeing the flashes of it throughout the run last season. So I got to say I was a little surprised by the D-backs, but the Rangers are dog meat. I don't think that was really ever.
They might have been a one and done. And it was good to see them get a World Series, right? That was their first one. They ripped the Band-Aid off. They finally got one through the hoop.
It's like karma. They just straight up paid for a World Series. So, I mean, of course, bad shit's going to happen to you right after.
They did. Yep. The baseball gods, they don't appreciate that. Not as hard-earned or blue-collar of a World Series win as others. But they got one. This year, they're nowhere to be found in the postseason. Kind of hilarious. The D-backs, they almost made it. They got close. But up until Monday in that crazy doubleheader scenario where the Mets, that first game, Mets-Braves on Monday was unbelievable. That felt like playoff baseball times 10. That's why people love it. That's why we play the game. But let's lock in, Javon. We're going to talk about who we think is going to win the World Series. But before we get into that, we'll go over the NL and the AL teams we think have a chance to make a little bit of a run here. Let me go ahead and give a little breakdown of who's won the World Series in years past. I already mentioned the Rangers and the D-backs last year. The year before that, it was the Astros over the Phillies, Javon. So, we had two NL squads win the last 3 years before that, though, with the Braves, Dodgers, and Nationals winning in 2021, 2020, and 2019 against the Astros, Rays, and Astros. But the last two seasons, the AL won the World Series. Are we thinking it's going to be AL or NL this year? I feel like after the last 2 years of being AL squads, maybe the National League returns to a World Series championship here.
You would definitely think, because looking at, a lot of the teams that people like coming to the World Series. People are starting to like the Phillies. People always like the Padres all year. We've got on that train. Cool story with the Braves and Brewers. I guess teams that have been there. The Braves snuck in off the win yesterday. And I don't know that many people really believe in many sides in the AL other than maybe the Astros. And then the Tigers have gotten hot. So they're everybody's favorite dark horse. And those two teams are playing each other. So in my opinion, it kind of feels like some AL team is going to sneak up in there and at least get to the World Series and make some noise when nobody wants them to.
I'm with you. The NL looks more stacked. Why don't we dive into the National League and see if we can find a World Series winner, or at least talk about some of these squads and their realistic chances to make the World Series or their postseason runs here, Javon. We can start out with the Phillies, a 2 seed in the NL here. I feel like the Phillies haven't been talked about too much this season, maybe a little under the radar. I don't know. Maybe people are bored of their successes. I don't know. They've struggled at times this season, but overall, they're still the Phillies and still a solid squad. Their starting pitching might not be as elite in the back end of the rotation, but they still have two studs at the front of it. Javon, what are your thoughts on the Phillies this year? Could they make a run? It's looking like they're going to play either the Mets or the Brewers in the next round.
Yeah, I like the Phillies. It definitely worries me that over the last couple of days, I've started to see people saying it's the Phillies' year. And usually when you get that team right coming into the postseason, that usually doesn't end well, as we've seen the last couple of years. But it definitely changes what happens in that wild card matchup, because the Brewers are a team for me, and I know they're kind of walking into a gift, being that the Mets had that doubleheader and they're facing a very depleted pitching staff. I don't like backing teams at all going into the postseason that haven't played meaningful baseball for a long time. And the Brewers being the state of the NL Central, that's been the case for them for damn near 3 months now because they have cruised comfortably at the top of that division. And now you have a Brewers team that also doesn't have the same pitching staff that we've been used to seeing year in, year out. Freddie Peralta is, I assume, going to be starting game one of every series. And he hasn't looked like the Freddie Peralta that we're used to seeing, not quite as dominant. And beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of questionable arms. Tobias Myers has been great, but that's a super young arm with no meaningful experience. You got Colin Rea, who's going to be getting a lot of innings there. So as much as you'd like to say you trust the Brewers pitching staff, I wouldn't say it's one of those teams that I really feel too confident in. So if the Phillies run into them, I feel like their path to at least the NLCS is pretty open. But if the Mets find a way to run through that series, they might be the team of destiny.
I mean, I would not want to play the Mets right now.
No.
Something just feels right with that team this season.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they kind of limped in, but before that, they were playing great. This team has been off and on, either 100% playing great or 0% getting crushed. I feel like in, series is on and off in the second half of the season. But the Mets overall, you look at that squad, a lot of veterans, right? And again, I feel like I correlate them with the Padres, a team that went all in recent years, did not have a lot of success. You could even say that they kind of stunk and they blew it. And people were making fun of them, saying, oh, they went all in. They got all these great guys and it didn't work. Kind of a joke, a laughing stock. They let those guys go. They keep some of the dudes. And everybody pretty much steps up for this 2024 season. I've been so impressed by the Mets. They don't have the biggest name guys, but they've got dudes stepping up. Lindor's having a great season. Their pitching staff, they don't have that elite ace up there really, but they've got a lot of veteran arms who have been in a lot of baseball games. They've got a lot of experience. So in the postseason, that could come into play, right? And their bullpen is not great, but they're not the worst. I'm a little bit concerned about their closer and his health, but, we'll see how much they need him. They got to get through the Brewers first. But I feel like the Brewers, like you said, Javon, I'm not too scared about them once we get into the postseason. They're more of a regular season wagon, but they haven't played a meaningful baseball game in over a month. Who knows how they're going to get it up against the Mets. And I feel like the Mets will probably win that series. And then we'll see the Mets versus the Phillies. And that's going to be must-see TV, NL East versus NL East. And I'll take my chances on the Mets there in that series, at least to keep it competitive. I would not want to play the Mets. And I feel like the Phillies, very popular team this year in the NL. Once we've gotten into the postseason, maybe not as talked about as much throughout the season in the NL compared to the Dodgers, but I personally will not be back in the Phillies, a.k.a. the Nats leftovers and all the great guys like Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, and Trey Turner. I feel like they've had their time. And I'm not going to back the back end of that rotation. I'm a little bit worried. I feel like that could bite them in the ass. The Mets, their experience, the veteran guys up there on the bump, I would back them as dogs against the Phillies, and I don't like the Phillies' path to a World Series. They are plus 500. You think there's any chance, Javon, they make a run, or depends on who they play?
It's definitely a chance. I mean, I would be 100% full go on the Mets to, first of all, win the series against the Brewers and then beat the Phillies if they weren't in the very unfortunate situation with the doubleheader, because that's the one spot that leaves them very vulnerable. And I know as this gets released, this is probably the start of game one, so we'll see how that plays out. But if the Mets can get through that series, I'm not a Phillies fan, but we'll see. We'll see just how open it leaves them in the wild card series.
It could come down to Edwin Diaz and his health. We see him, throwing only low 90s on that Monday doubleheader. That was kind of weird. And he was throwing, high 90s a week or so ago. People were saying he was back. Kind of looked like he took a step back on Monday. Did not have that velo. I'm definitely concerned about Edwin Diaz closing out games for the Mets. We'll see how much that impacts them. But let's talk about the Dodgers now. Let's pivot. The other wagon in the NL, Javon, a team that, has all the expectations to win a World Series. They've got the greatest player of all time this year, Shohei Ohtani. Been an absolute beast. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, his health is in question. Mookie Betts, when the lights are bright in the playoffs, that guy goes ghost mode. Do we think the Dodgers pull the Dodgers once again and fall short this season, Javon, with that stacked offense? It has not been the greatest year for the Dodgers. I feel like nobody wants them this season. Their pitchers are hurt. Their offense has been inconsistent. Their veterans are not stepping up. Guys like Chris Taylor have been struggling a lot all season, are hurt. It doesn't feel like a year where the Dodgers are going to make a run. And maybe that's the year they do it, Javon, because nobody really wants to take them. What are your thoughts on the Dodgers?
Yeah, I just can't get myself there with the Dodgers. As much as I would like to back a GOAT team when nobody really thinks they have the juice to do it, because everybody and their mother likes the Padres, us included, and everybody also has a Padres future ticket from at some point in the World Series or in the regular season for the World Series, the pennant or whatever it is. That rotation in the playoffs, especially if you're going to end up facing the Padres and I guess even the Braves. I know Chris Sale is a little injured, but maybe he comes back for the NLDS if given the opportunity. That rotation just doesn't do it for me, dude. It really doesn't, because really your rocks of the rotation, it's going to be Flaherty and then injured Yamamoto, or Yamamoto who hasn't really pitched much since coming back from his injury, like Walker Buehler, who's been really terrible. Like Landon Knack is going to get major innings into some form and out of the rotation. It's
Good
just
luck.
Yeah, especially against a team. If you end up facing the Padres, that's a team who puts the ball in play and is not going to strike out all that much. So I mean, really tough matchup for a lot of those guys. I just cannot get there with the pitching staff. It's the reason they've been so vulnerable all regular season, really, especially towards the end here because they're dealing with all the injuries. But it's really hard to trust them. So I can't say I'm in on the Dodgers.
Yeah, I mean, they're still getting odds respect there, Javon. Plus 360 to win the World Series this year. Best odds in the NL. I mean, roster-wise, they probably should get that respect, and they're still the Dodgers. But, they're still, like I said, the Dodgers, and they find ways to mess up, 9 times out of 10, right? I feel like it depends on who they play in the NLDS, Javon, to be completely frank. I feel like if the Padres can get through the Braves, which is not going to be as easy as people think, but if the Padres can get through the Braves, I love the Padres to defeat the Dodgers. I feel like the Padres have had the Dodgers number this season for the first time in a while. We've seen them, clinch on the Dodgers field this year. It just feels like a different season for the Padres. And although they are a popular, trendy pick to win, the World Series, or they were at least a couple months ago when everyone was buying low on that squad in the regular season, Javon, I think if the Padres can get through the Braves, which is going to be tough because the Braves are a team that nobody believes in this season. They just snuck in, but they still have all the talent in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if the Braves upset the Padres in that series with all their experience in the playoffs and the Padres once again fall short. But let's just say the Padres, my squad that I'm taking with that I still believe in, makes it through that wild card series against the Braves. I like the Padres to upset the Dodgers in the NLDS. But if the Braves can somehow squeak through and beat, the Padres there, Javon, I feel like they run out of steam and we probably see the Dodgers beat the Braves and the Dodgers advance to the next round. That's kind of where my head's at there.
I can respect that. I'll say that's a big one in terms of Chris Sale. That'll pivot my thinking pretty big depending on if they do get through the Padres series and whether he's healthy or not to pitch. Because as good as the Braves rotation is, even without him, that would really tip the scales even further their way if he's available. In a 5-game series.
I'll tell you what, Javon, I would not get your hopes up about Chris Sale making an appearance. You know what this reminds me of?
What?
Max Scherzer. In 2019.
Strasburg.
Oh, no. Max Scherzer in 2019. I don't know if you remember this. You probably don't because it's probably only Nats Hardos who remember this stuff. But Max Scherzer had some back spasms heading into the postseason. And Max Scherzer, I remember driving to the fucking World Series, Javon. Bought a ticket, spent all my money in college to come up and go to the World Series, see my team, in the fucking World Series for the first time ever. Spent all the coins to go. And on the way to the game, I get a fucking note if Max Scherzer scratched, back spasms. Everyone's like, all right, maybe he'll skip this start. Maybe he'll pitch tomorrow. It didn't seem like as big of a deal. We didn't see Max Scherzer out there again. They didn't put old man Jenkins back out there with back spasms to pitch. His fucking body would have fallen apart on the mound. No. I would be shocked if we see Chris Sale out there this postseason, and that could be the dagger for the Braves, right? They probably need him to advance and beat the Dodgers. If they get there, they might not even be able to get through the Padres without him, to be completely frank. But their bullpen was clutch in a doubleheader on Monday. We'll see if they can stay clutch. They're going to need it if they don't have Chris Sale.
Yep.
All right. Javon, any other thoughts on the NL before we move on to the AL? Keep your World Series takes till the end. All right. Gatekeeping here. We'll keep it to the end. But any other NL thoughts before we move?
No, I think that's about it for me.
Okay. All right. Let's move to the American League, a league that this season nobody really believes in to do anything in the postseason, but they still have big names like the Yankees, the Guardians, the Astros, the Orioles. The Royals are involved this year. The Tigers, hottest team in baseball. We're going to talk about them. But why don't we go ahead and start out with the Yankees, Javon? Plus 425 to win the World Series. Best odds in the American League. And they're going to play either the Orioles or the Royals. Where's your head at with this Yankee squad? Do we think this is the year they finally do something?
Yeah, it's hard to believe in them with the way, I guess, a lot of teams in the AL, including them, finished the regular season. It was nothing special, really. The second half of the season, they were a pretty big letdown from what the first half was, but I think they kind of got a gift of a draw between one of the other most disappointing teams in the second half of the season in the Orioles, and a Royals team that is super fun and finds ways to win, but they've also been struggling to close the season, and their offense has gone cold, and they have a really bad bullpen too. So I wouldn't be shocked to see the Yankees make some noise. And I got to say it, I'm very glad, not as a Yankees hater, but I would be as a Yankees fan, that they're not seeing really either of the other two teams in the wild card between the Astros and the Tigers.
Yep. Look, they got an easy draw, right? They got either the Royals, who I don't think are going to really do much in the postseason. That bullpen is atrocious, or the Orioles, who we saw get swept by the Rangers in the first series of their postseason last year. I feel like the young Orioles, they're still a year or so away. Now, they got Corbin Burns this year. We'll see if he can be a beast, and maybe that'll be enough. But I still feel like the Orioles are probably a year out, Javon. I feel like this year they'll probably win a couple games or win a game in that wild card series. Maybe they win 2 in advance, but I don't think this team makes a deep run yet. I feel like that's to come in the coming years when these young guys grow up a little bit, have some more postseason experience. It's a whole different ball game. The postseason, these teams start 0-0, which in the AL for the Yankees and the O's and some of these squads, that might be a good thing, right? Clear the mind after a bad second half or bad closing out the regular season. But I still don't think the Orioles or the Royals have the juice to beat the Yankees. And that's partially the reason why their odds are so short to win the World Series, the Yankees, because they're going to have an easy run, through the Orioles or the Royals. Either team they're going to beat. But I feel like, once they get to the ALCS, Javon, not having Nestor Cortez, if he's not able to get involved, that could be huge for the Yankees in their postseason run. Are they going to have enough starting pitching? Like, who's going to be their big 3-man rotation this year, Javon? Are they going to have to rely on one of these young arms?
I don't know what they're going to do. I guess they don't have to worry about a 3-game series, but you would probably assuming there's no Nestor, they would probably go Stroman, Rodon, Cole, not in that order, obviously.
Yeah,
that would be their big 3, and then I guess Luis Hill slot in there somewhere, and I don't know what their 5th option would be. Maybe Clark Schmidt, like they closed the regular season, or some like half bullpen game option. Maybe they do that with Stroman too. I don't really know, but I feel like they have the options with or without Nestor. And to be honest, I mean, that would be really big especially if they're facing the Orioles come out of that, because they need a lefty, and Rodon could dice them. But if they had Nestor as an option too, that would be big time for the Yanks.
Even if they could just have Nestor coming out of the bullpen and being that, veteran arm to go in there when they need it, when a young starter like Luis Hill maybe struggles a little bit or can't get through the 5th inning, and they put in a guy like Nestor for the 5th and the 6th inning. Like, they're going to need a veteran arm coming out of that bullpen to save them at one point. If that can be Nestor for them and they can have Luis Hill be that 4th starter, I think that Yankees team has a chance. And that's their best angle if the rest of the guys can stay healthy, and if guys like Carlos Rodon and Marcus Stroman, who have been solid this season and have shown signs of being able to be in that Yankees rotation, if they can do their jobs, right? I'm the biggest Yankees hater on earth. Okay, you guys all know it. I'm the biggest Yankees hater. I hate how they roll. They just buy all the best players in the free agency or the offseason, and they think that's enough. But hate to say it, Javon, I do feel like this is the season in a non-stacked AL where the Yankees could actually do something. If Nestor Cortez can come back and be that guy out of the bullpen, if Luis Hill can give them enough innings as a starter, as a 4th guy, I feel like this Yankees team with studs like Aaron Judge having his best career season. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody cares because Shohei Ohtani and what he's doing right now. Nobody's talking about Aaron Judge or the Yankees. It's crazy. I feel like this team is still kind of slept on. And Juan Soto, of course, he's going to do his job in the postseason. He's the clutchest young hitter I've ever seen in my life. This Yankees team has a chance. If they could just get some production from the bottom of that lineup, and if they can get Luis Hill as that 4th starter and Nestor Cortez, get that cortisone shot in that arm, get him up and moving, have him come out of the bullpen in the ALCS and in the World Series, this team has a chance. They do. Yeah. I hate to say it, man. It makes me sick. But the Yankees have a clear path. They do. They do. Let's talk about that other part of the bracket, Javon, in the AL. Let's talk about the Guardians. They're getting no respect to win the World Series. They're almost plus 1,000. Javon, what are your thoughts on the Guardians? Are they legit? Any chance? Or, if they end up playing the Astros or Tigers, I feel like either way, they're probably screwed. They play the best overall team with a lot of experience or the hottest team in the postseason. If the Tigers end up doing it, I feel like they're in the toughest spot out of any team who has a bye in the first round.
Easily. And I think they're absolutely caked, regardless of who they play. And it's just not the thing with the Guardians, is similar to the Brewers, but a little different. I mean, they have played some meaningful baseball, but we're so used to the Guardians to seeing them have this rock of a pitching staff. And really hasn't been that. Like when you're looking at all of their starting pitching, like the bullpen options have been great. Their bullpen's been rock solid, but a lot of the starting pitching has looked pretty vulnerable throughout the entire regular season, but like especially to close the season. So you look up and down, there's not really that rock of a starter that really scares the piss out of you for the Guardians that you know you're going to get real quality innings from, and you think has a pretty low ceiling, or I guess high floor, low ceiling of getting blown up, because Tanner Bybee's been a little iffy and been injured. Gavin Williams, same deal. Like they've used Matthew Boyd and Joey Cantillo in spots of starters / bulk guys, and they're probably going to do that in the postseason. It's tough to trust that pitching staff as much as past years. Like I said, similar to the Brewers. So the offense went cold to close the regular season, and you're a team who can't hit, relying on pitching that is not as good as you're used to having behind you. So teams like that, I really hate to back. And I know teams like that like the back of my hand, just like I've seen it with the Rays 50,000 times. And the Guardians are same general mold. So I really am not a Guardians fan either going into this.
Yeah. Hey, you got to respect them for what they do in the regular season, but you never really got to worry about the Guardians in the postseason, unfortunately, until that changes. I'm not going to change my mind. I think they lose to whoever advances in the wild card round there, the Astros or the Tigers. Whether it's the Astros, those veterans who figure it out, they probably do against the Tigers, and they hand them that L and then beat the Guardians. I feel like that's pretty much, what's going to happen here. As you can see, the odds for the Astros are plus 800. They have better odds, or I guess you could say shorter odds, to win the World Series than the fucking team who has a bye in the Guardians. So that probably tells you all you need to know right there. And then Vegas does not believe in the Tigers at all, plus 2,800 to win the World Series. Great story for the Tigers this year, Javon. You think they have any chance to win the wild card round against the Astros? I personally do not.
I think there's definitely a chance. It'll come down to, I think, what happens game one. And I guess as we're talking, or as people are listening to this, maybe that's already happened. But they can get off on a good foot and beat Skubal. That'll put the Astros on their back, which would be huge. And they'll probably go to Kikuchi, which may give the Tigers some trouble game two, but we'll see what they counteract with in a potential game three. But there's all the chance in the world. You can't really count out the Tigers. I don't think they have a deep run potential in them necessarily beyond like the two series that stand in front of them here. But I do think it's a scary team. I don't think you want to face them. If you're talking about anybody in the AL right now, those two teams in the wild card facing each other, and the Astros and Tigers are probably the only two teams I would say would be really scared to face.
Yes. Sucks for the Guardians. Once again, they get screwed, but it is what it is. And the Yankees have the easiest path of all time. Here's how the AL is going to play out, Chad. I've already seen it. Yankees advance to the World Series. Doesn't matter who they play. The Guardians lose. Doesn't matter who they play, but it's probably going to be the Astros. And then we see the Yankees and the Astros once again face off. And I think this year the Yankees actually get the better of them and advance to the World Series. That's what I'm predicting on the left side for the AL. We'll see how it plays out. As much as I hate to say it and it makes me sick, I do think Aaron Judge and Juan Soto can carry that team to the World Series. We'll just see if they can win it and actually fucking break the seal and do something important and useful for the first time in 14 years. The Yankees. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Javon, before we wrap up here, any other thoughts about the American League?
No, not too much.
Okay. All right. Excited to watch these wildcard series. In the NL, I love the Padres, man. I'll tell you what, I think if the Padres can get through the Braves, which is a big if, I really would not be surprised, Javon, if the Padres lose to the Braves, a team that nobody believes in this season that just squeaked in, but a team much like the Astros that has all the experience in the world and I still feel like has not played their best baseball yet altogether. If the Padres can get through, I feel like they upset the Dodgers there, but if not, the Braves, if they can advance, I feel like the Dodgers have a very easy path and they'll be able to beat the Braves there this season and advance. So it all comes down to that top right sector of the bracket in the NL. And then the Phillies, they don't want to see the Mets. Nobody wants to see the Mets, but very curious to see who comes out of that NL wild card in the Brewers versus the Mets, Javon. I hope it's the Mets. I'm biased. I have that future for the Mets or the Padres to make it to the World Series. So I'm sweating out both of those squads and hoping one of those two can do their jobs, but obviously have a better, more faith in the Padres doing it this season with that rotation. Let's just hope it's enough. And Manny Machado can keep hitting clutch nukes. Okay, he's been clutch all season. The vibe just feels different this year around the Padres for the first time in a while, but maybe they're too trendy. I feel like people are picking up on it. They're almost playing too good right now. Never thought I'd be saying that, but they're playing too good for my future.
I'm a little scared that they peaked too early. Not that
they might have
they really slowed down towards the end of the regular season, but That
They might
scares
have.
the absolute shit out of me.
Like
Outside of the
Jerkson
fact that,
Profar, Manny Machado, they've already hit so many game winners, so many clutch shots. Have
yeah,
they used up all their clutchness already? Is that even a word, clutchness? I don't know. But they might have already used it all up in the regular season. I don't know. I hope
maybe
not. Maybe that's just their year, though, right? It could be. It could
could be.
be, right? Typically in baseball, Javon, you get one wagon and you get one red hot team. Last year, the wagon was the Rangers. I mean, they went out and bought the best team, and the hot team was obviously the Diamondbacks. This season, right? It's kind of a weird vibe. No, wagon really involved in the postseason at all, Javon. Not a single team to win 100 games this year in the postseason for the first time in like 15 years, or in the regular season, excuse me. That's weird. And that tells me that the postseason is absolutely wide open. Javon, maybe we get two red hot teams and there's not even a wagon involved. What are your thoughts on the World Series and how you see this bracket playing out?
So I'm with you on the AL side. I think the Yankees can come out and win the AL just when nobody expects them to. Like I said, we got a gift of a draw, I think, playing the two teams that really looked mid to close the regular season. Not the Yankees did in themselves, but I feel like they match up pretty well with really either of those teams, especially if they end up seeing the Orioles, a team they know very well and struggles with lefties and in key spots. You're probably going to have a Yankees lefty out there. So I do think the Yankees can come out and win the AL, and I would not rule out the possibility if the Mets beat the Brewers and come out of that series of a Subway Series World Series. I feel like that would be absolutely nuts and cinema. And I would say if the Mets could be that hot team, I feel like they're kind of coming into the playoffs, reminding me a little bit of the Rangers, because they are also a team that I think has one of the highest payrolls in baseball. So they did kind of go out and buy the team. They're built a little differently though, so like they're a little less top heavy. You got a lot of veteran leadership though, so it could be a little Subway Series World Series grabs.
That would be absurd, and I would be here for it. That would cash one of my futures there. I'll tell you what I'm seeing in this bracket, Javon. I've got the Yankees beating either the Orioles or the Royals. I don't know who, but they're beating whoever. I've got the Astros advancing in the bottom left sector, and I've got the Yankees beating the Astros in the ALCS, advancing to the World Series. On the right side for the NL, I've got the Padres. I'm sticking with my team. I'm trusting my guns here, Javon, but I am worried about how trendy they are. I'll take the Padres still over the Braves, and I'll take the Padres over the Dodgers, who I still think are frauds. It just doesn't feel right watching this Dodgers team once again. It's hilarious, and I'm pretty confident they're going to fire their manager after they don't win the World Series this season once again. I'll take the Padres to advance in that top right sector of the bracket, and then bottom rights, I'll take the Mets. I'll be a freak. I'll trust my other future as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Phillies or the Brewers, either of those teams. I feel like that's the most confusing part of this bracket. The bottom right sector, we'll see how it plays out in the wild card between the Mets and the Brewers. We'll see how much juice the Mets have left in the tank, right? But I'll take the Mets and the boys up there in New York to advance and beat the Phillies there and shock the world. And then I'll take the Padres beating the Mets to advance to the World Series. And we've got the Yankees and the Padres facing off. And that matchup right now is plus 3,000 to occur. So if you want to sprinkle on that some lunch money, I probably will join you as well at plus 3,000. That's a pretty damn good price.
Yeah. You know what this year feels like to me, Grabs? This year feels like 2015, where not just for the common denominator of the Mets potentially being involved, but you remember how random the Royals-Mets World Series seems that year?
Yes.
It feels like the year that we're going to get one of those random matchups, which,
well,
I don't know that you can say the Padres are really that random at that point, but they're obviously a candidate and they haven't really been there in quite some time. So I guess they could fit, but I'm not a big Dodgers guy, not the biggest Phillies guy, I guess. The Astros could make some noise, so maybe they'll be involved, but I feel like we're going to get another, I guess Rangers D-backs is just another recent example too, but a really weird World Series matchup.
Yep. I'm with you. Look, postseason baseball is always crazy. That's why people love it. But this year, especially when there's no real wagon of a team, no team winning 100 games in the regular season, it could be even more chaos. And I'm here for it. Let's get crazy. We've got day games pretty much fucking all week, the rest of this week. Let's lock in, Javon. Let's have a day. Playoff baseball is here. I know you and me are both baseball guys. Let's make some coins. Let's enjoy the show. And let's hope this postseason is just as crazy as years prior. Okay? I feel like it might be even more crazy.
Yeah,
W's.
I'm in.
All right. Before we close this puppy out, I'm going to ask Javon, who is winning the World Series this year? Who do you got?
I'm going to go the Yankees.
Wow.
Against my rooting interest and yours too. Yeah,
That
I hate it.
sucks.
I hate it, but I really feel like it's their year, especially with that draw, unfortunately.
Well, what's the difference this year? They had Juan Soto, my pride and joy. That's
Yeah,
literally
your
the
guy.
difference. Yep, could be. I mean, people are going to be put on notice once again about Juan Soto. They're going to be reminded about how clutch this kid is in the postseason. The lights are never too bright. If anything, the brighter they are, the better he plays. It's crazy. That could be the difference this year for the Yankees. And if they can get Nestor back coming out of the bullpen, like I talked about earlier, I am unfortunately with you. I do think they have a chance. I do. And like I said, Javon, earlier, I do think the Yankees make the World Series. I'm with you there, but I don't think they win it. And I kind of wish one of those futures I took for the Padres or Mets to make it to the World Series, aka win the NL, kind of wish I took the Padres to win the World Series because that's what I'm sticking with. I've got the Padres over the Yankees. Give me the Pods, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, a team that lost Juan Soto and nobody thought they would do anything, and now they're here. And they have one of the best, most underrated veteran rotations in baseball. Let's see if they can put it all together and play some good ball for another couple weeks. I could totally see the Padres falling apart. They're very trendy. I feel like they're not even, a sleeper anymore at this point. They're playing so well. But I'm going to still trust them. That's my team from a couple weeks ago when I locked them in. Something just feels right and different this year with the Padres. And I'm very confident they could beat the Dodgers this season. Okay, I'll take them at plus 1,000 to win the World Series. We'll see if Manny Machado can clutch up for the kids.
Yep.
All right. W's. Guys, before we go, I hope you enjoyed listening to this MLB playoff pod. We'll be releasing more pods in the future, so please stay posted. Turn the notice on, especially on YouTube as well. I hope you're subscribed, but if not, make sure you are and turn those notices on. Okay, so you get alerted when we post new YouTube content. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcast, we appreciate you. Drop a like. Make sure you follow us on the Bookit Sports Podcast Network, and we'll catch you again in a couple days. Appreciate you listening. We'll be seeing. Enjoy the MLB postseason.